Om Shanti. I think many of you know what Om Shanti means, but just to explain the words, Om, I am. And who am I? I am that inner being, a being of peace. I am peace. It's a very simple translation of this term that has been used for thousands of years in India. And it's a beautiful reminder of who we truly are. And also, perhaps just being in this house, you've already experienced it without knowing what the words mean. It is a special time in history, and I suppose every generation has felt that. But the momentous things that keep happening suddenly, all the time, at the moment, I don't think we've ever had such turbulence. And so it is a moment in which really we need to come back inside and draw on our own inner resources. Just look around and see what's going on. There's civil wars, there's war, big war, there's climate change, there's natural disasters, one after another after another. Why do you think all this is happening? And in centuries gone by, people would have said, God is making everything happen. And today we know that none of this is God's work. God created a world of love, of truth, of joy, of beauty. And whether you call it a dream, whether you call it a myth, a legend, whatever, but absolutely every single tradition has remembered this, that there was a time, there was a place when there was a world of paradise here on earth. And so, through the centuries, the same story has continued. Can they all be wrong? I think that maybe there's some truth there. But what's the current state of the world? And what happened to that world that was paradise? Well, if you've got a beautiful garden and you let wild people into the garden, what are they going to do to the garden? They're going to just create rampage. And they're going to be tearing things apart, tearing each other apart. And so I think that's what's been happening. But I think it's now time for transformation. Why? Because when people say they want to change, when I say I want to change, only then can I make things happen for myself. But also when collectively we say we want to have change, then change can happen. There's a lovely image that comes in the scriptures of India, and they say that there was a mountain that needed to be lifted, and all people had to do was to just simply give a little finger. And by giving their little finger, the whole mountain was lifted. It was God's power behind it, of course, but it needed every person to give their little finger of cooperation. And so I think this is that time now that collectively we would like to see change. Who would like to see the world change for the better? I think the longer I wait, the more people will raise their hands. Which is true, that we're really very, very tired of the things that are going on now. And we wish we could take a magic wand and just, hey, presto, bring about transformation. Yes, transformation can happen quickly, but not with a magic wand. It'll happen as each one of us takes responsibility. And through that responsibility, we bring about change. And we've put two very different words together to demonstrate how this change can happen. One is strength, but inner strength, which means it's nothing to do with control or power outside, but it's everything to do with the power that I carry within myself, but maybe I've forgotten about. And it's time now to awaken that and use that again. And the other is human kindness. Now, these two words don't normally go together. You'd say that kindness is something very soft, and strength is the opposite. It sounds very harsh, strong. But yet, in fact, both of these things go together when you think about the human being. Because the human being has amazing qualities which work together in perfect harmony and perfect balance when things are okay. And of course, what happens is that when this inner harmony and perfect balance goes out of sync, then we begin to see the repercussions outside. Could you ever have imagined that we could be responsible for making the climate change? Climate is such a big thing out there, and I'm a human being here. What can I do to move the clouds? How can I shape the warmth of the sun or the depth, the heat of the sun? It sounds impossible. But in fact, if I tell you the trajectory that Sister Gayatri was mentioning, it's related to everything that's happening at the current time. Everything starts inside the human being. My thoughts create my consciousness. My consciousness creates my awareness. Stop me if you think I'm going too fast. So thoughts lead to consciousness, lead to awareness. My awareness leads to my attitude. My attitude changes my vision. My vision leads to actions. Our actions create a culture. Our culture creates the world. Agree? And so, yes, we are directly responsible, though it's not a happy thing to say it, but once you acknowledge something, then you can start doing something about it. If you close your eyes and pretend it's not there, or that it's not real, it's not true, then you can't do anything to change it. But once I've acknowledged it, then yes, I know the mechanism through which I can now begin to change things. And so we are responsible. Just in terms of climate, let me just conclude that particular sentence. When my consciousness is spiritual, what is it that I need? I need very little in terms of physical things. And even when my consciousness is not completely spiritual, but my consciousness is still with a high degree of awareness of values in life and character and so on, I make sure that there's enough not just for my own family, but I make sure that there's enough for my community, or maybe my heart is even bigger. I'm aware that my world is my family. And so the whole world, and Bharat has this wonderful statement, Vasudha Vishwa Kutumba. And so the world is my family. We've been taught this since we were little. And so when I have that awareness, then I know I can't just take for myself, but it's something that has to be shared with all. When it comes to a point of darkness in the world, when we become grossly materialistic, to the point where we've forgotten our own spiritual identity totally, then in that external materialism, then of course nothing is enough. I want more, and it's still not enough, and I want even more. And so our materialistic identity connected totally with, where does this word materialism come from? Matter. So when I get connected only with matter rather than the living being within, then in that state of consciousness, what happens is I can never be satisfied. I'm always going to be needy inside. And no matter how much I accumulate out there, there'll be an emptiness of spirit within that drives me to accumulate more, to collect more, to more and more and more. And so that's what's happened to the state of the world. We are currently consuming 2.5 planets more than we have resources for. And so how long will it take for the water to run dry? It's sooner than we think, because the glaciers are falling apart. They're running dry. And it's something that's actually visible. Some of you may have seen a little clip of a video that was done. I was in India, it was in March, I think. And it was this young woman, and she'd gone to the Antarctica, and she planted one of these Shiv Baba flags on the Antarctic. And I thought, this must be really not true. This is photoshopping, it's not real. But by chance I had a conversation with the same person a little while later. And I said, was it a fact? And she told me it was. And I won't tell you the detail. But she said, what was shocking was that where there were white mountains of ice and snow, there are now brown mountains. The glaciers are melting, which means we're going to run out of fresh water. I've just been at a water conference recently, and I heard that only 3% of the water on the planet is actually drinkable water, potable water. Lots of water everywhere in different forms, but only 3% is actually drinkable. And how much of that do we have left? So this isn't a horror story evening. It's a story of hope and courage, human kindness and inner strength. But yes, we need to bring about change. And so, no, I don't need more of this and more of this and more of that to be happy. When I connect with myself within, then I'm going to be able to connect with the love, the joy, the truth that is there within. And when you think about these qualities and you think about kindness, what is kindness made up of? There's a touch of love there. There's a great deal of compassion there. There's an inner joy that is waiting to be shared with others. There's a sense of purpose, of truth. And so kindness is composed of all of these values that are the inherent, intrinsic qualities of the inner being of absolutely every single human being. The original core values of the soul are these qualities. And so kindness is part of human nature. It's not separate. It is there within all of us. When was the last time you saw an act of kindness happening? On the one side, I'm saying it's intrinsic. And on the other side, well, it's a crazy state of the world where there's a huge amount of darkness, and so we don't always see kindness being expressed. Rather, we see greed and selfishness or violence. And so something went wrong. And it was a very, very simple thing, and that was ignorance. Evil doesn't have an identity of its own. God has an identity. Who's the devil? It's ignorance. When I don't know right from wrong, when I don't know who I am, that state of ignorance leads us to doing things that are very far from human kindness. And so if we want to put things right, it's not so difficult. All I need to do is to understand a few things. Understand who I am, understand who is the divine, and thirdly, understand what I need to do at this moment of time. Thousands of years have gone by and we've done whatever we wanted to do for ourselves, and a few people have always been inspired to do so much for others. But today, I think it's time for all of us collectively to say that it's time to change, and it's time to again use those inner qualities that we all possess to be able to transform the world out there. And I believe that is what is our destiny. I don't believe that we're going to continue in a state of darkness forever. When I think back to 50 years ago, when I came back to London having taken training in Abu, and I was surprised. I'd only been away for 18 months, and within that space of time, people began to be interested in vegetarian diet, people began to be interested in yoga. I switched on the television at home, and there was an American guy who was teaching people yoga exercises. Nobody knew about Raj Yoga, but yoga came into our language. Vegetarian diet had started. Meditation. When I'd left London, nobody was talking about meditation. When I came back, TM had started, and so transcendental meditation was all around. So within a short space of time, things had shifted. And if you think about how difficult it was for people to imagine that smoking could be banned in public places. I remember the agony of trying to travel on aeroplanes where the non-smoking section was still filled with smoke from the smokers. How do you separate the smoke in one cabin away? And it wasn't even a separated cabin, it was just a few seats here and a few seats there. And the trouble I had with the smoke that I was having to take in as a passive smoker. And so I could not have believed that within the space of months, public opinion changed and everybody accepted. You cannot smoke in airplanes, you cannot smoke in restaurants and offices, public places. It was very dramatic, but it happened very fast. And naturally, nobody had to fine people, they just became aware. So change is something that can happen quite soon, but it needs consciousness to change. And so change consciousness away from the external and just the awareness of the body and nothing but the body, and come back to the awareness of spirit, of soul, who am I? And you change. Because now, in that awareness of experiencing the inner journey and going within, I'm able to feel the peace that I carry within myself. Don't have to go away on holiday to find peace. Actually, I have a question. Who has left their home happy to go on holiday and come back tired and exhausted and not very happy? Probably many, many people. And so it's not a given fact that going away on holiday is going to make you happy. That's for sure. So where do I find peace? Trying to get to the mountaintop is going to be a bit of a trek. Going into the jungles, it's not going to be very peaceful there. But when I go on that inner journey, yes, there is peace. And there is love and truth and joy. And so it's much, much easier to bring about change than you had ever imagined was possible. And so to stay connected with the soul, the being that I am, means I discover the source of human kindness. And I begin to experiment with it. I begin to use it in my life. And the more you use it, the easier it becomes. And of course, they have this expression, if you don't use it, you lose it. And actually, this morning we were having our spiritual lesson, and I realized that it was a statement that our founder had made in 1991. I don't know when the world out there started using this expression, either use it or lose it, but I was actually surprised because I hadn't remembered. But it was in 1991 that our founder was using that expression, and he was talking about the goodness. The more you use that goodness, the more it grows and develops. And if you don't use it, you lose it. He was using those English expressions, imagine. So what I need to do today is to accept that the original state of the human spirit is goodness, and experiment with it myself to find out how true this is. This is the thing about Raj Yoga. You don't have to believe a thing that I tell you. You can ignore it all. But what I would request is that you experiment with some of these things. And through your own personal experimentation, you'll be able to see whether it's true or not true. But experiment with it. Let's do it even now, just for a few minutes. Just let your body sit comfortably, quietly. And just go on a journey within. Going inwards, watching my thoughts, and letting them settle down. Watching my thoughts slows down their speed. And as my thoughts slow down, I can select one thought, the thought of peace. And I go within and connect to that sacred space within where there is peace. I am a being of light. I am a being of peace. I hold this in my awareness. And the power of peace radiates to this physical body of mine, allowing it to be calm, the power of peace radiates out into this room, further out into the city, and out into the world. I keep this awareness of peace. And I come back to the moment here and now. And now I resolve to stay connected with myself, I resolve to keep this awareness of peace with me at all times. It took a few minutes to do this. Thank you all for joining in the experiment. Who felt that there was some peace that they were connecting with? The more you practice it, the easier it becomes. And so I'm sure that even just trying this out, morning, night, anytime, you're sitting on the bus, you're sitting in the train, try it. And you'll feel that it gets easier and easier to go inside and keep connecting and to keep holding on to that awareness so that there can be chaos out there, but you're able to experience the calm within. And that's the way you're going to be able to deal with things out there. When things are in chaos outside and your mind is in turbulence, how can you deal with anything? But when your mind is calm, then you know what it is you need to do to bring calm to the world of chaos also. So, very important to be able to continue with this practice again and again. And then, on the other side, the subject of inner strength. There are two things about this that I want to mention. One is to be able to draw strength from outside and accumulate that within. But the other is to ensure that there's no leakage. Because if I'm drawing power, but there's also a leakage somewhere, I'm not going to be able to accumulate anything, and it's not going to be very useful. So I need to learn to take, but also to be able to make sure that, yes, it's available for me to use in the way that I would like to, but certainly that there isn't a leakage happening that's going to cause that emptiness to return again. And my understanding is that it's impossible to take inner strength from any human being out there, because every human being is in great need of inner strength themselves today. You might think that someone's very powerful, and then a situation happens that knocks them out, and you see that, in fact, it was a mask. There wasn't any real strength. Yes, they were trying to manage, trying to help others, but they didn't really have that inner capacity. Or maybe they used their capacity to an extent to which they themselves then were absolutely in a state of burnout. How often have you seen that? And so where do I go to find inner strength? I haven't explained the background or given you any further details, but I'd just like to share it again. And it's up to you to come back and find out more about all this. But just as every human soul has energy, a certain amount of power, and that's what life is about, soul and body coming together, and it's not the body that has power, it's actually the inner being, the soul, that has power, and that is making this body of mine function. Soul out, and the body can't do anything. The body can be in very bad condition, but yet if the soul is still there and is aware and alert, many things can still happen. And so Stephen Hawking's an amazing example of that, gone now, but he left behind an amazing legacy. So every soul has a certain capacity of power, everything is different. No two things are the same. There might be a flower bouquet of beautiful matching flowers, but actually start looking at them, and each one is a little bit different, which is what is beautiful about life. You can't have two things identical, living things. Two pears, two apples, they're from the same tree, and there'll be a little bit of a difference. If anything's artificial, then it's factory made and plonk, 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 and it's the same. But real, and there's a difference. So every soul, the living being, different energy levels. And there's one soul, we would say, is the supreme or the source, and that being has maximum energy, enough to be able to supply all of us and more. And that being is often called the Almighty Authority, Sarva Shaktivan, the one who has all might, all strength. But it's the strength of kindness, it's the strength of love, the strength of goodness. Again, nothing harsh or imposing. And so this being is the one that we can connect to, and that is called Raj Yoga. Raja, the king, the sovereign, the master. Yoga, to link together, to yoke together, to join together. And in meditation, when the soul connects with the divine, one is able to experience the power of love, the power of peace. It's, again, something for each one to experiment with. So when I hear somebody talking about it, I might be thinking, well, it's their imagination. But when I do it myself, I discover whether it is imagination or whether it is actually real. And that's what I am experiencing. And so the invitation is to find out more and to experiment with that, to be able to let my mind, my thoughts move to the divine and make that contact so that I'm able to draw all that power and love within myself. And so inner strength is actually that inner power with which I'm able to accomplish whatever it is I need to do in my life, both for myself as well as my family, my work, the world. There's different manifestations of this inner strength. On the one side, you could say that it's the power of love, the power of peace. But there's also different aspects that we can explore. The power to cooperate. I was asked at this water conference by two people who were discussing issues with teams at work. And the question was, we know that the power of cooperation can bring about changes that otherwise just are not possible. And yet, how come we find it so difficult to cooperate? And they looked at me for an answer because, well, the white sari tells its own story, but they also knew my background. And so it's a subject I've thought about for a long time. And I said, it's ego. And they looked at me and looked at each other. And they hadn't thought about that. They were thinking of all sorts of other things, but to me it was very straightforward. When there is ego of who I am and the ego of wanting to prove myself, how can I cooperate with anyone else? But when I'm willing to let go of my ego and coming back to the inner identity is the way in which we can let go of ego. Because my real identity is the key to my own inner dignity. And nobody can can ever take that away from me. If my identity is based on position, if my identity is based on possessions, or my external form, all of that is temporary. All of that can shift overnight, absolutely overnight. But my identity based on the awareness of the inner being, and my dignity and self-esteem and worth based on that, it stays with me under all circumstances. And in that condition, where I know that I've got absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain with cooperation, I'm ready to do it. But where I'm a little bit concerned that, well, if we're going to cooperate, then it's not my name that's going to be mentioned. It's not my salary that's going to be further up the scale. It's not my performance that people are going to talk about. But no, that is all secondary. It really is. Why I talk about cooperation especially, because the crises that the world is facing cannot be solved by one individual or one human collective organization or country. It needs cooperation from all. And only through that can we resolve the issues of the world today. And so inner strength, one manifestation of that is cooperation. Another manifestation, which again is absolutely critical at this moment, the ability to discern. When did the era of post-truth start? I remember it. It's 2016. 2016, and we had two things happen. First it was Brexit, then it was Trump. And post-truth era was launched. And that year, that term got into the dictionaries. So where are we today? It's still very much that era. It's got even more complicated. And so can I have an inner awareness, an inner compass that's able to guide me in the right direction so that I'm not trapped by all the falsehoods that are going on around. To be able to have that discernment capacity so that I can recognize what is a glimmer of truth, and to be able to step away from all the other glittering lights that pretend to be the truth. So you can see that it's very much something that's needed now, at this moment, so that I can understand what it is I need to do now. So I've just mentioned a couple of these qualities that are needed from within, but there's a whole host more. But as you go on your own inner journey and make that connection, you'll find that you're able to draw from that source whatever it is you need at that precise moment of need. Somebody was sharing today how they were very young and they didn't really know God, but at critical moments when they were alone and they were in need of help, help would come. Literally, at that critical moment, help would come. And so definitely there is someone up above who's waiting to guide us, who's waiting to help us, and is waiting to give us all the power we need to change ourselves, but also to come together collectively and do something for the world. So that's one thing, to be able to connect with the source and draw the power. But the other side, how do I prevent the leakage? Many of you sitting here know Dadi Janki. I think she visited Leicester over the last several years, many times. Her first trip to Leicester was in 1974, when most of you were not around, either not around at the meditation center or not around in these physical forms. There was a tiny little place in Herbert Avenue. Where's Babu Bhai? Somewhere. Right at the back. So he kindly opened up his heart and his home, and the family invited people to come into their home. We were invited to come and stay, and we'd come and stay for the weekend, and we'd have meditation classes. So the point that when you do have that awareness of who that being is, then you draw that power within yourself, but you also learn to accumulate it so that it's there, available for you, and also with which to serve others. So Dadi Janki lived to be 104, and when I first knew her, she would have been in her 40s, 30s even, maybe 30s actually, and I was 8. And I had the amazing fortune of being with her for a long part of that period. So I always had the thought that her body is so fragile that she's going to leave any time. I saw her nearly go many times, and yet she survived to 104, and not just survived, but thrived. And when we'd ask her, Daddy, where do you get your energy from? Where do you get the strength from? And she would say, I have never wasted my breath, my thoughts, my time, my energy, physical energy, spiritual energy, financial energy. And she was extremely generous, but she never wasted a penny. Did not allow anything to go to waste, especially her own energy. And so, can I take a lesson from that? Well, think about it. Something happens, and I can't do anything about it. It's happened. The milk's spilled. I'm not going to be able to pick it up and put it into a cup. The best I can do is to just mop it up and clean it up, and that's it. But I'm never going to be able to retrieve it. It's gone. And yet I keep thinking about it. It shouldn't have happened. I should have done this, all sorts of things. And that's just a little physical thing that's happened. You're not going to go bankrupt getting another bottle of milk or carton of milk or whatever it is you get. But the amount of time and energy we spend thinking about things that have happened that we cannot change this moment. Maybe in the future we'll be able to, but at this moment, how much time, energy, and thoughts am I giving to that situation? You had a telephone call, and it wasn't a very pleasant call. But there's nothing you can do about it. You just had to listen and make soothing noises and say, it's okay, it's going to be fine, it's going to work out. But you put down the phone, and that conversation is running in your mind for how long? So the amount of thoughts that we expend without any purpose, it's incredible. The amount of energy I've lost through all of that, the amount of time I've lost, and once thoughts have gone, they're gone. I can't retrieve them. I can't call them back. It's impossible. And so the point, I can learn to put a full stop to wasteful thoughts. I can see something's happened, my mind's just starting to go off. Hey, stop. Put a full stop there and then, rather than engage with it and let it go running, and then 5 minutes later think, well, this is such a waste of my time. Or maybe it's not just 5 minutes, it's 50 minutes that go by thinking, thinking, thinking. And so can I learn to put a full stop to wastage, to leakage? And if I can learn to do that, wow, that's it. I've learned how to save my energy so that then it's there available for me to use at a time when I need it. Otherwise, my thoughts have got all tangled up, my thoughts are all in a confused state, and I'm faced with a situation where I need to make a decision, but I don't have the mental capacity to be able to do anything about it. And so things get more and more tangled and confused, and this is where we're at. And so it's very important to be able to take power from God and build up our own inner strength, but also to use our understanding. What is it that's going to be useful to think about? What is it that's going to be useful to give my time to? And what is it that's not so useful? Very simple discernment. Useful? Carry on. Not useful? Stop. But we don't do that. And so a system that I have to create within myself to be able to check it and change it, so that it's not that the horse goes running off and I'm chasing after it, trying to catch it, and I'm not going to make it. The horse is faster than me. And so I need to keep the stable door shut rather than let it go running out and regret it later. So a few thoughts to share about inner strength and also human kindness. But really just to know that at this moment, although we're seeing the dark night, there is something beyond. The night does not last forever. Never. There's always a new beginning, a new day, a dawn that's waiting to break. And so I think that that's where we're at now. And I feel that the dawn has broken. More people are talking about meditation than ever before. More people are interested in the subject of consciousness than ever before. More people are thinking about holistic approaches to life rather than just a linear approach. A holistic health is something we're all aware of. So I think the dawn has actually broken. And I think the light is entering the world in a very beautiful way. And this is why all of you are here. It's a working day, it's the end of Monday, and Mondays are not so pleasant usually, and yet you've taken the time and trouble to come. This is part of the dawn. And so happy to meet you all, and I'd like us to have another few minutes of meditation. So let yourself sit comfortably. And the reason why sometimes people are a bit scared of meditation is because they think, well, how am I going to stop my thoughts? How am I going to be able to stop my mind? But you don't have to. Meditation's actually just channeling my mind in a different direction. So instead of thinking about tonight's menu or tomorrow's shopping or tomorrow's agenda, set that aside for just a few minutes and just take another journey inwards. And I'll speak out my own thoughts and invite you to follow. I'll let the body sit still so the body can become calm and relax. And I feel the energy that I am, the inner being, the light that's shining in the center of the forehead. This is who I am. I am the inner being. I am a being of light. In this awareness, I feel the presence of the divine. I'm surrounded by the rays of God's love.
Om Shanti. Thank you, Sister Jayanti. It's always a delight to have you here. I know you were here a few weeks ago, but it's always a pleasure because you always uplift the whole spirit with everyone, and everyone's pleased to see you. I just have a few questions that sort of arose from your sort of talk. You talked about inner strength, inner consciousness. Consciousness leads to attitude. Attitude leads to visions, etc. Now, many souls, many individuals would say, well, I'm in a place where I'm being sort of suppressed by family, by work, by situations. How can I let my consciousness reveal itself? What can they do to sort of just awaken themselves from this ignorance that you spoke of?
It's an inner calling. There's something that motivates you to find out more about what's going on inside you. And there's so much material available online, but there are also so many different places where you can go knocking on the door and find out. And it's a free world. It really is.
So what sort of steps could one take if they don't have the sort of, access to, say, like Harmony House, but they're at home and they want to break free, but they just don't have that power within them?
Everybody has a little gadget, right? I can't imagine anyone in this room who doesn't have a little gadget. Type in the word meditation and see where it takes you. That's it. It's just that I need to be able to realize that there's something more than just the external life that I've been leading. And if I have this inner calling to find myself, there'll be 1,000 doors that will open.
Now, once you awaken this consciousness, how do I keep this consciousness alive? How do I keep it going? And it's not just for that moment.
You know, when you light a flame, then it needs to have oil, and you need to pour in oil continually so that that flame continues to shine. So I need to keep feeding my mind good things, and I can find them online again, or I can have a good friend with whom I can have a chat. At work, sometimes you meet up with souls who externally are just there professionally, but then you start having a conversation with them, and there's something that's going on deeper inside that you're connecting to also, and there's a resonance that brings you together. And so you start making time to go for a walk in the park in the afternoon instead of sitting in the cafe. So you go for a walk and you have a chat about the things that are there within your awareness. So if I'm really wanting to feed my mind with nourishing thoughts, I'll find a book, I'll find something. And so there's a huge amount of opportunity today. I don't think anyone can be deprived if they want to find out.
And is there a time that it really works? You know, I mean, if I come home and I've had an exhausting day at work, or it's been a challenging situation there, is that the best time to start sort of waking my consciousness?
I think you should have a good meal and go to sleep. I don't think it's a good idea to start searching for consciousness in that condition. I think the best thing would be sleep and wake up, and when you wake up, then spend a bit of time in silence, or find some material that is uplifting, and that'll help.
This awareness, you know, we do live in a world that's bombarding us with, you are this, you are that. How do I break these influences there? Because they're constant.
When I began my inner journey, it was such a powerful experience that I wasn't bothered by any of these things that were going on outside. So I know that it happens like that. If I'm going to give my focus of attention to those things, they take on a new energy and they become strong. But if the focus of my attention is my own awareness, then that's going to gather strength and momentum, and that's going to carry me forward. So whatever it is you focus on, whatever it is where your attention goes, energy flows, right? So where is my attention going?
You talked about human kindness. Now, I think we all like kindness, because I've seen situations where we've had extreme chaos and you see the humanity of people revealing themselves. And I'm just thinking to myself, why can't they do it all the time? So how can we sort of exhibit that kindness, especially when we're in an environment where people are very angry, people are very short-tempered, people are very, you said, very egotistical?
What I want is to be true to myself, rather than allow those external influences to impact me. And so here's a situation now. Well, how do I respond? Do I want to react to them in the way they're behaving? It's not going to be very useful or healthy. What I'd like to do is to be honest with myself, so that at night when I try and sleep, my conscience supports me and doesn't keep me awake. And so if I'm being true to myself, then I'll connect with my own inner goodness and use those qualities in my life.
Now, when challenges come, you talked about, you know, use it or lose it earlier on. Now, what happens if I've got it, but I've never used it? How do I actually start using them?
At some point, you know, a child starts crawling at some point, and then from crawling, the child starts walking at some point. So everything has a beginning. And so if today I've started my day with a few moments for myself, and maybe I've experienced some inner peace, maybe there's some word that has touched me from the things that I've heard or read, then at that moment, in that moment of challenge, I remind myself that word, that feeling, that expression comes back, and I start applying it.
Now, I use my phone quite a lot, and I do charge it in the morning. But then the more I use it, the more power it uses, and so I have to recharge it. So is there a way that we can recharge ourselves during the daytime as well?
Absolutely. This is what meditation is. It is a recharging of my own inner battery. And actually, this is why the whole subject of inner kindness being lost comes up, because the inner battery is actually at the point of almost cutting out. It's so discharged that we're just not behaving in normal human terms. Think about relationships, and relationships should be bringing us great joy and happiness. And yet, so often, relationships are the cause of the highest levels of stress. And so things have really gone topsy-turvy. And this is because we've forgotten that we need to recharge our own inner battery.
You talked about that we're connecting with other humans who themselves are empty. And what are you going to get from people who are empty? But then you talked about God. I think sometimes people, when they hear the word God, they seem to run in the opposite direction. And you did say that actually God created a world that was full of happiness. So how can I sort of come close to God in a world that's convinced me it's God's fault, that's why it's all happening?
I think I have to start with knowing myself. I had come to a point where being exposed to a variety of different traditions, asking questions here, I'm told it's a mystery. Asking questions there, I'm told because it's written in the scriptures, so you have to believe it. I wasn't getting any answers. So age 14, I thought, okay, I'll come back to all this much later on. I don't need it for now. But then destiny, chance, then when I was 18, I started studying Raj Yoga in India. And I discovered the joy of knowing that I am this inner being, this being of light. And once I experienced that, then when I heard the lesson about God, that it isn't a deity with 8 arms, it isn't somebody up in the sky looking down and, pulling the strings and making us dance like puppets. All sorts of images have been given which are not correct. But God is that being of light, the supreme soul, the source. And I didn't have any trouble in believing that, because I'd already felt how I am that soul, a being of light. So to think about a being of light, the soul who is supreme, not in size, but in terms of qualifications, attributes. And all I had to do was to connect with that source and see what happened. So my trust in God, my faith in God came, A, through understanding, but B, through my own practical experience. And so this is why I say, you don't have to believe anything. Find out for yourself.
You gave an example of an individual who sort of believed in God, and then at the times of need, that help was there in some shape or form. So is there a sort of sign knowing that I've connected with God?
Oh, when I connect with you, I know it, right?
Yeah.
And I don't mean just on this level of sharing a platform, but if our minds weren't connected, you'd say, hey, come back, where have you been? What were you thinking of? So you can feel it, you can see it. So in the same way, I think we forget that God is a being, a personality, a being who feels, who thinks, who knows, who understands me and recognizes me. And when I'm in the awareness of who I truly am, of a soul, then in that awareness of soul, I can feel God's presence and feel that connection and feel that, yes, I belong. I belong to Him and He belongs to me. It's a feeling that one is able to have. It's not imagination.
You said that collectively we all have to come together. It's no single organization, no individuals. But we may feel that we're insignificant. You know, what can I do that can make a difference to this world? Can I make a difference? And if I can, how can I make it?
You know, when there's a tray of water, when the tray of water starts to freeze, it's one here, one molecule, another molecule, and then when a certain number of molecules are frozen, then suddenly the whole tray freezes. And so one at a time, and when we get to a point of critical mass, the majority have changed and understand and start following.
So can we create a critical mass here tonight and finish this evening session where we have that connection with the divine, and then we also feel, yes, I can make a difference?
We could definitely do that.
Om Shanti.
Thank you. Om Shanti. Coming back to that awareness of I, the soul, I'm a being of light, shining in the center of the forehead. And in this awareness, I find myself in the presence of the divine. And the waves of the ocean of peace reach me. And from the source of unlimited love, the power of love reaches me. The power of peace allows the soul to take charge once again and be my own master. Without peace, I had no more strength. And now, as I regain peace, I am the master of my thoughts and my feelings. And the power of peace reaches out into the world, touching human souls, making them aware of who they are, and the power of peace touches all forms of life. So no living creature is afraid anymore. All are held in this mantle of peace. All aspects of nature return to a state of calm and cooperation. and the anger of the elements is seized, so that nature again begins to nurture and sustain. The being of peace, the being of love, transforms each human soul and everything in the world we live in. Om Shanti.
Sister Jayanti, thank you very much. Our deepest gratitude for you to come here. Sister Jayanti is actually doing a tour. Tomorrow evening, she will be in Leeds, and then on the following day, that's on a Wednesday, she'll be in Manchester, and taking up this theme, the call of the moment, inner strength and human kindness.